How to know if you are trapped in a dysfunctional, toxic relationship with yourself. It's very heavy, isn't it? And essentially what I really want to speak to in particular in this topic is this increased obsession with growth, like personal growth and personal development. And so, because there are so many ways we can be dysfunctional with ourselves, but in particular, I think that this is a really ever-growing body of dysfunction or consciousness that's showing up, that's actually creating the opposite of what most of the intention of wanting to move towards growth is. So I'm just going to talk about the nature of dysfunction, because usually when we're in a dysfunctional relationship, especially with ourselves, we don't know it. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, break down what dysfunction is, break down what functional is, and give you a couple of prompts that can support you to begin to break away from that pattern. So the first one I would say is just understanding that dysfunctional will feel quite normal and will feel quite functional if you've been exposed to, or dysfunction has been modeled to you in relationships, which you turn on almost any movie or look back to relationships of our parents for the last few generations, where they didn't have as much conscious connection and self-awareness as the generations coming through now do. So there was a lot of repression of what we felt, pushing down desires, doing what we had to do to get on in life and pay the bills, rather than doing the things that really made us come to life, and staying in relationships because that's just what you do, and you push through the hard times, and you either move away and disconnect in communication, which then intimacy dies, which then that's how all of the toxic behaviors and patterns kind of begin in relationships. So if we think about this in regards to a relationship with ourselves, if we are always looking to move away from suffering, but think, I'm doing my positive spiritual meditation practices, or I'm doing my affirmations, or I'm doing my breath work, or I'm doing my journaling, but the practice of being intimate with ourselves is bypassed by kind of putting something over the top to feel good, then that's actually dysfunctional, because you're just moving away from yourself through a practice. And that's when you want to move away from suffering, give me the tool, give me the technique to do this, give me the thing, I got the toolkit, let me get it out. But if you notice that there's this subtle desire or this reflex, this knee-jerk reaction to do the thing to get away from the feeling, whereas unless the intention is to become more intimate with it and then move through it and shift and change from that place and that intention and that willingness, then it's actually dysfunctional, because you're moving away from pain. On the flip side of that, if you're trying to move towards a state of being, say you want to be like the divine masculine, the divine feminine, or you want to be powerful, or you want to be in your power, or take back your power, or successful, or abundant, and you're not satisfied with what is now, so you're trying to move towards something else, towards a goal, you're still bypassing. And the two themes in this there's two different variations of the same thing here, which is you're perpetually dissatisfied with what you have, and therefore perpetually either moving away from what you don't want or trying to get towards what you want from a place of disconnection within yourself. Functional also, and that's why actually dysfunctional can be hard to spot, because we don't necessarily feel bad, but the indicator is that if you sit still and you just be with yourself, it doesn't actually feel good. Does that make sense? Wish you could answer me. Yes, I assume so. Functional or healthy, let me put it this way. What exists inside of us, if we're connected to the two different movements of energy and aliveness that are within us, there's this beautiful stillness that's so deep at our core, right deep down in our being. And there's this aliveness, this ever-changing aliveness, and they move and dance within each other. because of culture, because of experience, because of pain, because of like disconnection and disassociation, either modeled or because we had experiences that we continually shut ourselves down and then lived from that place of shutdown and habit and reflex and just kept pushing. If we're disconnected from that, then we're wanting it from the outside, right? And that creates this codependency, this dysfunction that I'm talking about. Whereas if you're more connected to yourself, you will feel life more, as in you will probably feel feelings more. They will feel more intense. And life will feel full, like HD kind of full. And this stillness that's inside of you, and this flow and this energy and this like storm within you that exists and dance, the two energies moving, if you're connected to them and you're allowing them to be alive, and your practices are, I guess, a devotion or a respect or a reverence of that life force within you, or that consciousness within you, so to speak. Don't get caught up on the words, just feel what's underneath here. So if you're connected to yourself, let's just say, and that feels really, just say content, then all of the things that you go to do, including the practices or the goals that you go for, they will only just be an extension of this contentment or this fulfillment within. And they will only enhance, the outside stuff will only enhance what's within. So that's how you know you're in a healthy, functional relationship with yourself, when shit could hit the fan, but you still feel peace inside. If shit hits the fan and you wobble and freak out and you need to do something quickly and you, for an extended period of time, because the freak out and a wobble's very human, but you feel like you're helpless to that unless something outside changes, that's dysfunctional, because you're not leading yourself. You're not connected to yourself. So dysfunction really stems from disconnection. So my question to support you, if you want to move out of dysfunction, and I actually believe that in some way, shape or form, all of us have a little bit of dysfunction going on. And it's a human thing, and if we can just be more humble and willing to look at that, that's where we need to begin. So I guess a question to ask yourself is, are you willing to own that you're in charge of the dysfunction? You may not have meant to, you may have just learned it, you may have picked it up, but are you willing to admit? Because what I find is when people are wanting to grow or do the work, if that becomes like, if they're in that place where it's fresh or new, or they've been doing it for a couple of years and they really want to maybe even teach or lead, then I find that there is a resistance, that pride gets in the way, and there is a resistance to admitting that they're in a dysfunctional relationship with growth. Yeah? So are you willing to look at and ask yourself if truly the work is actually supporting you to become more open and intimate and content, and not just perpetuating this need to grow, or this need to do the work, or this need to do more, or this feeling like you've got to do the practices, you've got to be in it, or you've got to always be like, working hard, because that's where the sabotage kicks in. Because if there's a belief there that you're only growing, or you're only becoming this certain kind of person that you think you need to be, ironically, which is the problem, then you will create within yourself hardship to overcome. And you'll always need to be overcoming something, or that your mind will default to negativity or past pain or self-doubt. That creates a suffering for you to then get away from into those habits, right? So you see that the dysfunction is created by the idea that right now, inherently, we don't have access to a deep peace within ourselves, that we don't have control of that, and that there's something to fix or change. Whereas if we can come from the place that right now we're whole, we're human, and we're being with that, and we want to kind of shed all of this so that we can get closer to self, then we're on the money, right? So are you willing to look at yourself? Are you willing to look at your dysfunction and take ownership of the suffering that you might be perpetuating, the victim that you're playing, or the hero that you're trying to be in your own mind? And are you willing to realize that you've created this and put that down? And I would say that the very first step after that, because if you're not willing, then don't worry, stop watching, because you need that first. And then, but if you are, which if you're watching this, then of course you are, then I think me just reminding you that life has so much aliveness, has so much in, like, fullness in it, if we're willing to be totally and utterly present with the ordinary, mundane moments. That's where this, you know, you hear people say like heaven on earth exists, in that deep presence of the ordinary, mundane, everyday moments. I would say that that would be the epitome of a functional, healthy, fulfilling relationship with self and life, is that if you can feel extreme contentment, peace and fullness with just everyday stuff. So this is just an invitation of a willingness to look at yourself and willingness to look at the dysfunctions and the obsessions that may have proliferated and gotten out of hand, and then ask yourself if you're willing to let that expectation and all those pressure go and begin to come back closer to home and be willing to be intimate with discomfort, but also intimate and deeply accepting of who you are in this moment right now, and then live from there.